So there are a handful of really cool features that I want to share with you in this lesson that you can only get to in the slide editor. So how do you open the slide editor? Well, there are a few ways. You can navigate up here to your toolbar, go to the far left, and you'll see the editor button here. Click on that. That's one way. You can go up to your top menu, mouse click on the word view, and then select editor here. There's a third way. You can hover over any one of these slides. Push the control key down and select edit slide. Not quick edit. I actually showed that to you in a previous lesson. You want to make sure you select edit slide. Now, before we go any further, I don't talk about the reflow editor. There are capabilities of editing in that option, but I do cover those, at least what I think you should know as a new Pro Presenter operator. I cover those in the import lyrics lesson. Okay, let's move on with the editor. Well, there are a lot of good features here that I want to share with you. And to begin with, you'll notice over here in this area is a representation of all my slides. If I scroll up and down, you'll see that I have 15 slides. You sometimes have to do that so you can just get a feel for how many slides you have in this document. Now I can increase and decrease the size of these slides, by the way. If I hover right in between this dark area and this white area here, you'll see a double flat arrow will appear. There it is. I can mouse click and drag to the right to increase the size so I can actually read what's in those slides, or I can drag it to the left to decrease. So that'll really depend on what size screen you're working on. This top row of features I'll talk about, but all these items allow us to add visual elements to our slide down below. Over to the far right are many tabs. These tabs give us access to the properties of whatever item, whatever modification, whatever change we're going to do, or anything we're going to add to our slide. We can go over here to these tabs, and I'll be talking to you about a lot of the features in these tabs throughout this lesson. Finally, this is the area that I'll be working on. So if I click once after I've selected the slide, I'll see that I can access the text box. And if I click again, I get a blinking cursor, which allows me to make a change, correct a typo, maybe change to a different font, or even increase or decrease the font size. So let's quickly talk about that real fast. I'm going to highlight the entire line of lyrics there. I can navigate over here to the letter A tab, which is my text properties tab, and I can change the font by clicking on that and selecting a font. I can click on the secondary button there to add an item such as bold or bold and oblique. This list will change depending on what was originally installed with the font. If I wanted to change the color, I could mouse click on that, and then I could select one of these colored pencils here based on whatever I have selected up here at the top. This is what I get when I click on this particular tab. I'll close that out. I can also add bold or italic or underline to the group here that's highlighted. I can change the font size by clicking in this box and typing in a new numeric value. I can add an outline by increasing or decreasing this number, and then of course I could change the color by clicking on that box. What if I wanted to left justify, center or right? You would do that here. If I wanted to make the text go to the very top of the screen, the middle or the bottom, this is where I would go. After I make all my changes, I could select apply to all, and it would change all the other slides. Very handy. What if I wanted to preview whatever I've changed? Well, I can navigate down to show, and when I do that, I'll see over here in the preview window any change I may have made. Let's clear that by clicking on clear slides, just like that. So that's the basics as far as real quick making a change. What if I wanted to add an additional line or two of text? Well, I would click here to the far right of my last line of text. I would push the enter key and I would begin to type. What if I quickly added 2 additional lines? Now I just typed in, this is a second line, this is the third line. I did this because within a single text box with multiple lines of text, I could then navigate over here to text reveal, mouse click and select bullet list. And when I do that, you'll notice over here in this slide, a couple of dots just showed up. If I close this out and I click once, you'll see the first line. If I click again, you'll see the second line. If I click again, you'll see the third line. That is a multi-click slide that is very handy for worship or for revealing additional lines of information such as scripture or teaching notes within one slide. That's very handy. So I'll close this out by clicking on clear slides. I'll go back into the slide editor, control mouse click, edit slide. Let's move on to the next item that I want to show you. I'll click on this slide to use that as the next slide of items that I want to show you. So after I click on this slide, I'll navigate up here. I want to show you all these items. So I'll click on this first one. If I want to add an additional text within this slide, I click on this button here and you'll notice that I now have a new wireframe. And if I double click, I can begin to type. Okay, not a big deal, but basically, if you want to add additional text boxes with additional words, you can mouse click and rearrange certain text items that you have in this slide. I'll mouse click and drag that over. So not that you would do this, but if you want to add additional text, that's how you do it. Now, this is not a multi-click slide. You won't be able to make it into a multi-click slide unless within each text box you have additional lines. So keep that in mind. Let's move on to the next slide that I can use as an example for the next item, which is, what if you want to change the background from a solid color or a transparency to, if you want to change the background to a solid color and get rid of the transparency, well, you can do that. You can mouse click on this rectangle here, click on that, and you'll see this rectangle showed up. If I wanted to change the size or the color, well, let's start with the color. If I navigate over here to the text properties, to the object properties tab, there's a few items here that I'll talk about, but here is where you change the color. If I mouse click on that, we'll change it to this kind of a bluish purple color. I can then mouse click and drag it and place it wherever I want. I'm going to make this the background, so I'll drag it to the corner, maybe mouse click and drag that to the far right. I'll purposely not make it fit because up here are a bunch of numbers that you need to be aware of. Width and height, which is what the W and the H stand for. You can mouse click and type in the actual numeric value of the size of that rectangle that I want, or that you want. I want mine to be 1920 by 1080 because I do eventually want that to be the background. You can also numerically type in, I'm going to type in 0 there, for placement of the graphic, and this stands for the x-axis or y-axis, and I know I'm kind of giving you all this information or these terms that are more used for creating graphics, basically. You'll probably get used to a lot of these terms the longer you use ProPresenter, but basically 0, 0 means whatever graphic I've created, regardless of the width and the height, would make it and place it dead center. 0, 0. 0 on the x-axis and 0 on the y-axis. It would make it show up here. But the problem now is it's covering our text, right? We originally had text in there. If you navigate over to the second tab, which is our slide properties, you'll see that ProPresenter will show you layers. And if I mouse click on the shape element, this color, and I drag it down beneath the text element, it now becomes the background. Very handy, of course. Very nice feature that ProPresenter has to show you once you have multiple layers. This is very helpful here in the second tab titled Slide Properties. You can also bring that background, once it's selected, to the foreground by clicking on this button here. That'll bring it to the foreground, or click on that button to make it go to the background. So I wanted to bring that to your attention. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Mouse click on that because you could also, well, there's a drawing tool here in ProPresenter. If I click on that and I mouse click and drag, this is done with Bezier curves. It's interesting how this works. I don't typically do this, but there it is. And it, again, remember, it brings it in, meaning ProPresenter brings it in as a top layer. So how do you get rid of a layer? Well, you can mouse click on it and push delete, just like that. All right, let's move on to the second or the next item that I want to share with you, and I want to use this slide as an example. I want to quickly import a photo, so I'll go up to this import photo. I'll select, let's say, that photo there, hit select. I bring this up because even though I briefly spoke about this in a previous lesson, I didn't bring up layers. And that's important to remember. Again, I know I just mentioned that, but anytime you import something from this top menu, it'll always be the top layer. So if I wanted this to go behind, of course, mouse click and drag it. Mouse click and drag it down. There we go. Now it's the back layer. If I wanted to work on that layer, I would select it, mouse click. In fact, I'd like you to get in the habit of holding the shift key down when you scale a visual item, no matter what. If it's a graphic item, and then you can mouse click on the additional layer and move it to wherever you want. Whoops, this is a little tricky. Maybe I'll move that down. I'll resize this photo. Shift click drag so that you scale correctly. Drag that down just like that. Now I'll move this up here. There we go. And of course you can resize, move things around. You'll see yellow lines show up that have kind of a snap feature, and that just helps you guide as you're moving things around. Okay, let's move on to the next item that I want to show you, which is putting a video, importing a video into the slide. Now that, when you bring it in, of course, makes it the top layer. If you mouse click and drag it down, now it becomes the back layer, or the background, actually. And then, of course, when you play this slide, the video will play as well. If you want to preview it, you can mouse click on Show. There we go. I can see how that's going to work. Remember, if you want to rearrange anything, it's easier to click on it over here first, and or let's say the background, mouse click. I'll see how tricky that is. I actually clicked on the background, but because I selected the middle part, it defaulted to the text box, which is okay. I can move that over just to kind of get it out of the way. Click on the video element, then move that down. I can resize. I think you get the picture here. Make that smaller. Bring my text element over here. There we go. I know this isn't the most creative thing to do, but I just want to show you how this works. Okay, I want to show you the next item, which is bringing in a live video just for the slide. So if I click on this button now, I don't have the hardware for it. If you did, then you would select that particular hardware and then click OK. Once you've done that, then you'll see the window where the video will be shown. And remember, it's going to show on top of the text. So once I get to this slide in the presentation and there's a live video going on, I will not see the text. So it's important to remember that because you may want to move that text. You can do it by clicking on this item here in the layers, mouse click and drag the text down so that it's at least at the bottom of the frame of video. And of course, by clicking on the video itself, you can resize that frame. Very handy. Okay, this next item is really cool. If I wanted to add or show or reveal a website, this is a great feature. As long as your computer is connected to the internet, click once on this. You'll see this box here in a moment. You'll see, there it is, Renewed Vision's website by default will appear. So of course you want to make sure you change that. You can navigate over here to this gear wheel on the far right. Click on that, and that's the image video properties. This is where you would type in the website. Very handy if this is the last slide of your presentation, and you can fill the entire slide with the website. Another item that I want to bring to your attention is if you want, you can refresh how often this updates. And I think I made this a little too large here. I can click on it and resize it. Now, if it's out of the way, you can go back over to the Object Properties tab and make it smaller by typing in a value, basically. Or you can go over here to the Layers tab, make sure it's selected, drag it down and resize it. And if I wanted to make it perfect, I could do that. I showed that to you with the object. Remember that earlier? So I'm just going to kind of eyeball this. But now, when I get to this slide in my presentation, it's a live view of my website. Now, I do remember, of course, that there's a text element behind there. I can select that, either bring it forward, depending on whatever the message is or what it says. I can drag it down. And of course, I can change that. But it's handy to have that as well there for additional instructions or the actual www.url address. It's very nice to have that there. Last but not least, if I click on the last slide, I can show you what I want to share with you in this lesson. I can add scrolling text. I would simply click on that. I don't know if you saw that. I click on this button right here. Then I would type in a message. This is, scrolling text. Okay, once you type something in, I would suggest that you add spaces. Maybe a dozen if it's this short, before and after. Spaces before and after. You can select speed, loop immediately, loop with delay. I'm going to leave it on loop immediately. So when I select OK, you'll see that this very small box appears. I'm going to mouse click and drag it down to the bottom. I'll drag this over to the far right, drag this to the far left. Whoops, I just lost it. And I'll drag it to the bottom even further. Now, with all these changes, all these things that we just did, I'm going to click so I can go out of the editor, and I'll quickly click on that last item that we just created. You'll see the scrolling text. Very handy if you want a message when people are walking in, or maybe something as they're walking out. Maybe your next service will appear. That's very handy. I'll clear that out. We'll click on this, which shows our website. Very nice, very handy feature. I do like that. This is another good one with a live video. I don't have it, but if I click on the slide, I would then get a live video shot of whatever the cameras are pointing at. This is the video slide that I imported into the slide itself. That's the photo. We spoke about that. This is the one with the changed color background, and this is our multi-click slide. Very nice. Now you might be thinking one more thing before we end here. This is also very important. I'll clear this out. What if we open up our video image bin down here? Can't we add backgrounds or video or visual elements to these slides? Yes, you can. Of course you can. It's just a different way to do it, other than being in the editor. Now this is not the editor, but I want to quickly show this to you real fast. You could mouse click on a background item and drag it up into the slide. It then becomes the background for that slide. Okay, I can do the same thing with a graphic image, such as this item right here. I can mouse click and drag that up. The difference, though, in doing it here compared to in the editor is if I go back into the editor really quick, Control click, Edit Slide, and I want to look at those layers that I've been sharing with you. Let's see what's going on here. There we go. I'll select that particular item. Notice over here there's not an additional line to show me that background layer. So I don't have access to the layer here in the editor. Now I could if I then control click and select convert media to queue, then it becomes a permanent part of that slide, and I would have access to it. Control click, edit slide, then I would have access to it. There it is, as the additional layer. Just want to bring that to your attention. If I don't do that convert item, if I don't do that, let's see, control click, it's not there because I've already converted it. Then the only way to get rid of that background, I'll use this as the example. Control click on it, remove queue. Very important to remember. Okay, that's the difference between dragging items up from your video image bin down here to make it a part of the slide. So we've covered a lot of good stuff in this lesson though. I'm confident you'll use one of these items in the not too distant future. Great stuff that I showed you in this lesson, but you are now ready to move on to the next lesson.